The German sentry never hears the commando behind him. 5 seconds to unconsciousness, 12 seconds to the end. The Fairbairn-Sykes dagger does exactly what it was designed to do. By the time Hitler realizes what's happening to his Atlantic wall, it's too late, and he'll sign an order so illegal it will put his generals on trial for their lives. Landing craft pierce the freezing mists. On the decks, men of the Hunter class check their Thompson submachine weapons and adjust their Bergen rucksacks, ready to unleash a new form of violence upon the Third Reich. These are Churchill's answer to a strategic nightmare, and they are about to make the German High Command realize that their hegemony over Europe's coastline is not as absolute as propaganda suggests. As the ramps drop, the commandos hit the beaches at 4 locations simultaneously. Within minutes, coordinated explosions rip through the industrial heart of the islands, vanish in towering pyres of oily smoke. 800,000 gallons of glycerin are lost in hours, while 225 German prisoners are rounded up and led toward the waiting destroyers. This is Operation Claymore, and for the first time, the Wehrmacht realizes they have a new problem. A problem that strikes from darkness, neutralizes efficiently, and vanishes before reinforcements arrive. To understand why these raiders terrify the Third Reich, we rewind to June 1940. Britain stands alone. France has fallen. The British Expeditionary Force has abandoned its heavy weapons on the beaches of Dunkirk. Winston Churchill circulates a memo to his chiefs of staff that reads more like an adventure novel than military doctrine. He demands the formation of units that can conduct butcher and bolt raids along the occupied coastline, a force that will strike from darkness, leave behind fallen German soldiers and vanish before the enemy can respond. Lieutenant Colonel Dudley Clark, inspired by Boer commando tactics, provides the organizational framework for this new specially service brigade. But what Clark and Churchill are creating is something the German military machine has no framework for understanding. German doctrine centers on massed formations and blitzkrieg victories. Small groups striking with surgical precision and melting back into the sea is alien to their thinking. At first, Abwehr intelligence reports are dismissed by General Franz Halder as Allied propaganda. This dismissal will cost the Wehrmacht an entire division, tied down guarding empty beaches forever. As successful raids continue, dismissal shifts toward alarm. The commandos demonstrate that trained raiders can strike anywhere along 5,000 kilometers of coastline. Every coastal installation now requires defensive troops, early warning systems, and rapid reaction forces. Hitler begins to obsess over Norway as the zone of destiny in this war, convinced the British are using these raids as a prelude to a full-scale invasion of Scandinavia. This paranoia prompts him to move major fleet units, including the battleship Tirpitz, into Norwegian fjords, effectively bottling up his most powerful surface vessels. In a bunker outside Trondheim, a German lieutenant reads the after-action report from Lofoten. The commandos were in and out in 4 hours. The factories are still burning a week later. He looks at his own garrison, 18 men to defend 5 kilometers of coastline. That night, he doesn't sleep. None of them sleep, because the commandos could come for them next. Every shadow on the water could be a landing craft. Every sound in the darkness could be the last thing they hear. Hitler thinks he's facing raiders. He's actually facing his own execution warrant. These raiders are being forged in the Scottish Highlands in a crucible of violence that will redefine what it means to be a soldier. The path to becoming a member of the Hunter class begins with a brutal filter at Achnacarry Castle. Volunteers arriving at Speen Bridge railway station are met with a mandatory 13-kilometer speed march to the castle, while carrying 70 pounds of equipment. instructors shadow the recruits in lorries, noting any man who struggles. Failure results in an immediate return to unit, a punishment more dreaded than combat itself. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Vaughan enforces a training philosophy summarized by a brutal truth. Better men fail in Scotland than perish in occupied Europe. Achnacarry is transformed into a stark Nissen-hutted camp where trainees cook their own meals and maintain pristine uniforms despite the pervasive mud. The curriculum is designed for ungentlemanly warfare. At the House of Shadows, instructors William Ewart Fairbairn and Eric Anthony Sykes, veterans of the Shanghai Municipal Police, teach the lethal art of silent neutralization. Recruits learn the carotid thrust, a specific move with the Fairbairn-Sykes dagger, designed to sever the carotid artery, causing unconsciousness in 5 seconds and the end in 12. This is gutter fighting that relies on speed, simplicity, and absolute finality. The Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife becomes the primary symbol of this lethality. It features an acutely tapered double-edged stiletto blade, optimized for thrusting through the heavy greatcoats worn by German sentries. In Norway, Corporal Smith uses the carotid thrust on a German sentry during the Vågsøy raid. 5 seconds to unconsciousness, 12 to the end. The sentry never makes a sound. His body crumples silently into the snow, and Smith drags him into the shadows before the next patrol arrives. Live ammunition and explosives are integrated into every exercise. Machine weapons are fired over the heads of crawling recruits to simulate battlefield chaos. Men who flinch are sent home. Men who freeze are sent home. Only those who move forward through the storm of lead continue. The Commandos are also issued products from Station 9, a secret research facility in Welwyn. Among these is the Welrod, a manually operated bolt-action pistol with an integrated suppressor designed for eliminating sentries at close range. Its report is 73 decibels, quieter than standard suppressed weapons because it lacks the mechanical noise of a semi-automatic slide. The Welrod's first field test is at a German checkpoint in France. The suppressor is so quiet, the guard standing 3 feet away doesn't hear his partner fall. He watches him crumple, confused, then feels the Welrod press against his own temple. 2 neutralized sentries, no alarm raised. The commando team walks past and vanishes into the night. Tactical mobility is enhanced by gear that transforms impossible obstacles. Every man wraps a 6-foot toggle rope around his waist. During the Vågsøy raid, 3 commandos dangle over a 40-foot cliff face, their toggle ropes knotted together, while German sentries stand 10 feet above them, unaware. The wind howls, the rope creaks. One man's hands are slipping, but they hold position for 20 minutes until the patrol moves on. That rope is the difference between mission success and a body at the bottom of a Norwegian fjord. They use the 1942 Patton Bergen rucksack, which utilizes a metal frame to distribute the weight of 120-liter loads. A commando can carry enough plastic explosive to level a factory, enough ammunition for a sustained firefight, and still move silently through enemy territory. But while the commandos learn to neutralize in silence, German scientists are building something that could make them obsolete. A weapon that can see in the dark. A weapon that's already downing Allied bombers by the hundreds. Scientist R.V. Jones identifies the Würzburg array, German radar proving devastatingly accurate at directing night fighters and anti-aircraft weapons. If they don't steal this technology, the bomber offensive ends. Britain loses. If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of history's most elite fighting forces, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video on legendary special operations. On the night of February 27th, 1942, Modified Whitley bombers take off from RAF Thruxton, carrying C Company of the 2nd Parachute Battalion toward a cliff top near Bruneval. Major John Frost sits on the edge of a hole in the floor of his aircraft, his feet dangling into the sub-zero air of the English Channel. Their objective, Operation Biting, is to seize a Würzburg radar array and extract its vital components. Accompanying the 120 paratroopers is Flight Sergeant C.W.H. Cox, a cinema projectionist turned radar mechanic who has never set foot on a ship or airplane. Cox is vomiting into a bag before the plane leaves English airspace. His hands shake as he checks his toolkit for the 3rd time. He's a technician who threads film reels for a living. Now he's jumping into occupied France with a parachute he's only used twice. Cox carries specialized tools to dismantle the German equipment, while Royal Engineers pull a hand trolley to carry the booty from the cliffs. The drop is conducted under a full moon, which Frost immediately realizes compromises their surprise. As they descend, the paratroopers are clearly outlined against the night sky, met by heavy anti-aircraft fire. Tracer rounds arc through the darkness like angry fireflies. Cox's parachute opens with a crack that sounds like a weapon shot. He can see the ground rushing up, German soldiers running toward the landing zone. He hits the snow hard, rolls badly, and lies still, certain he's broken something. The jocks quickly orient themselves and move toward the villa housing the radar. Cox stumbles after them, clutching his toolkit. Frost blows 4 blasts on a whistle, signaling the attack. A fierce firefight ensues as commandos surround the villa and neutralize the German guards, some attempting to escape over the cliff edge. The sound of weapon fire is deafening. Every explosion makes Cox flinch. Cox and the engineers reach the Würzburg. His projectionist hands, used to threading film, now shake as he unscrews German radar components. Every bullet makes him drop a tool, but he keeps working because men are falling to give him this time. Private Newman, a German-speaking refugee serving with No. 10 Inter-Allied Commando, interrogates a captured Luftwaffe technician. The technician keeps glancing at his watch. Newman presses his Sten weapon against the man's throat. Finally, the terrified German breaks. 100 soldiers, 3 kilometers away. 20 minutes, maybe less. Newman sprints to Cox and shouts the news. Cox soars faster. The metal screams. The Germans are coming. Cox and the engineers use brute force to detach the radar's aerial, eventually sawing it off. Cox's hands are bleeding, cut by sharp metal edges, but he doesn't stop. They load the transmitter and switching unit onto the trolley. 2 commandos fall, covering the retreat. Cox sees their bodies and nearly vomits again. He clutches the Würzburg components and refuses to let go. Frost leads his men toward the evacuation beach, only to find the Nelson detachment has been misdropped 2 kilometers short. A German machine weapon nest on the cliff reopens fire, pinning the commandos down. The surf is red with British blood. Wounded men scream for medics. The smell of explosives mixes with salt spray. Just as Frost prepares a last-ditch defense, the lost men of the Nelson Group arrive behind the German lines, taking the machine weapon post from the flank. The naval force arrives after Frost fires an emergency green flare. The raiders and their technical prize are embarked under cover of weapon fire. Cox collapses in the bottom of the boat, still holding the transmitter, shaking uncontrollably. He never lets go, not during the crossing, not when they reach England, not until a senior officer physically pries it from his hands. The Bruneval raid is a resounding success. The captured components allow scientists to finalize window, aluminum foil strips that will eventually blind the German radar network during the bombing of Hamburg. But as the Commandos celebrate in England, Hitler is pacing his Wolf's Lair headquarters, reading the after-action reports with shaking hands. The British have stolen his radar. They've proven they can strike anywhere, anytime. He summons his legal advisors and asks a question that will damn the Wehrmacht forever. Can we execute prisoners of war if they refuse to fight like soldiers? The lawyers hesitate. They know what he's asking. They know where this leads. But they cannot refuse the Führer. The answer, carefully worded, is yes. Hitler smiles. He has his justification. Buoyed by the technical triumph at Brunewald, Lord Louis Mountbatten proposes a far more audacious plan. A direct frontal assault on the only dry dock on the Atlantic coast capable of servicing the Tirpitz, the Normandy dock at Saint-Nazaire. If the battleship can be denied access to this facility, the German Navy will be unlikely to risk her in the North Atlantic. The plan is as simple as it is sacrificial. An obsolete destroyer will be converted into a floating bomb and rammed directly into the dock gates. The HMS Campbelltown is selected, her bow packed with 4.5 tons of high explosives set in concrete and fitted with delayed action pencil fuses. On the night of March 28, 1942, a flotilla of 18 smaller wooden craft escorts the Campbelltown up the Loire estuary. Commander Robert Ryder and Lieutenant Colonel Charles Newman lead from motor weapon boat MGB 314. The convoy uses authentic German recognition codes acquired during the Vogtsøy raid, but the ruse collapses within 8 minutes of the dock. German searchlights illuminate the estuary, and every weapon opens fire. The trailing mahogany launches, laden with extra fuel, prove a fatal mismatch for shore defenses. Many are set ablaze, their crews and commandos perishing in the maelstrom of shellfire. The screams of burning men echo across the water. Despite losing 2 helmsmen, the Campbelltown increases speed to 19 knots. Lieutenant Commander Stephen Beatty issues the final navigational commands, blinded by the very searchlights that aid his visibility. Shells tear through the destroyer's superstructure. Men are falling on every deck, but Beatty holds course. At 0134, the Campbelltown slams into the massive dry dock caisson, lurching forward until 9 meters of her bow rests dead center on the entrance gates. The impact throws men off their feet. Metal screams. Beatty announces to his crew, "Well, here we are, 4 minutes late. Commandos pour ashore to secure the bridgehead and destroy the dock's water pumping and gate-opening machinery." The fighting is a room-by-room clearance of fortified buildings. Lieutenant Colonel Newman, though he need not have landed, is one of the first ashore. He organizes a defense that keeps 6,000 German defenders at bay, while demolition teams complete their tasks. The smell of cordite hangs thick, mixing with the stinking mud of the estuary. German infantry pours into the dock complex. Machine weapon fire rakes British positions. Grenades explode in enclosed spaces, the concussion waves shattering eardrums and breaking bones. Men fight hand-to-hand in the darkness. Bayonets, knives, rifle butts. By dawn, evacuation by sea is no longer possible. Almost all the motor launches have been destroyed. Bodies float in the Loire. The water is thick with oil and blood. Newman gathers his surviving commandos and issues the order to do our best to get back to England and to not surrender until all our ammunition is exhausted. They fight through the narrow streets, but most are eventually surrounded and captured. Newman fires his last magazine into a German position, throws his empty Sten weapon at them, and raises his hands. The next morning, the Normandy dock area is swarmed by German officers and Organisation TOT workers surveying the wreckage. The Campbelltown sits wedged in the gates, an apparent failure because she has not exploded. Senior officers climb aboard to inspect the damage, mocking British incompetence. At noon, while Beatty is being interrogated by a German naval officer laughing at the raid's failure, the delayed action fuses trigger. The blast vaporizes the senior German officers on board. The shockwave shatters windows 2 kilometers away. The dry dock gates cease to exist. A mushroom cloud of water, metal, and body parts rises hundreds of feet. Beatty, sitting in his interrogation cell, feels the building shake and smiles at his captor. "We're not quite as foolish as you think." The interrogator's face goes white. He runs to the window and sees the smoke rising. The gates will remain out of service until 1948. The explosion echoes across the Loire, and 600 kilometers away in Berlin, Adolf Hitler hears the news and makes a decision that will put his generals on trial for their lives. Of the 611 men who undertake Operation Chariot, only 228 returned to Britain. 169 fell in action and 215 taken prisoner. The Commandos garner more Victoria Crosses during this single operation than any other in the history of the Combined Services Command. Hitler is furious that a flotilla could sail up the Loire unhindered. He sacks his chief of staff in the west and orders the construction of 15,000 bunkers by May 1943. This is the institutional birth of the Atlantic Wall, consuming 17 million cubic yards of concrete and 1.3 million tons of steel, mobilizing 600,000 workers. But Hitler's rage doesn't stop at concrete and steel. He signs the Commando Befehl, October 18th, 1942. All captured Allied commandos, regardless of uniform or surrender attempts, are to be eliminated to the last man. Any who survive initial combat are handed over immediately to the SD for execution. The moral erosion of the Wehrmacht under this order is absolute. General Anton Dostler orders the elimination of 15 US soldiers captured during Operation Ginny II in Italy, despite their proper uniform. The Americans are lined up and eliminated, their bodies dumped in unmarked graves. In Norway, General Nicholas von Falkenhorst personally oversees the elimination of commando survivors, insisting they not survive for more than 24 hours. The commandos are interrogated harshly for information, then eliminated. These actions form a primary basis for the war crimes trials at Nuremberg. General Alfred Jodl and Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel are eventually convicted and hanged for distributing and enforcing the commando order. Admiral Erich Raeder is sentenced to life imprisonment for the elimination of Royal Marines after Operation Frankton. Before we wrap up, we want to hear from you. Which special operations unit from history would you like us to cover next? The SAS? The US Army Rangers? The Soviet Spetsnaz? Let us know in the comments below. At Nuremberg, the prosecution reads the Commando Befehl aloud in court. General Jodl listens, his face grey, knowing his fate is sealed. The prosecutor asks, "Why did you fear the commandos enough to order their elimination?" Jodl has no answer. The truth is too terrible to speak. The Third Reich, with its millions of soldiers and thousands of tanks, was terrified of 300 men with knives. The Hunter class didn't just win raids, they won a psychological war. They made the Wehrmacht afraid of the dark. And that fear, signed into a secret order in October 1942, put the men who gave that order on the gallows in October 1946. 4 years. Exactly. The British Commandos are the crucible in which modern special operations are forged, directly influencing the formation of the Special Air Service, the Special Boat Service, and the United States Army Rangers. 83 years later, a British SBS operator crouches in an Afghan compound, his Fairbairn-Sykes dagger in his hand, the same design from 1941. ISIL fighters are 30 feet away. He presses his thumb against the crossguard, feels the double-edged blade, and remembers the motto carved above the House of Shadows doors at Achnacarry. Better men fail in Scotland than perish in occupied Europe. He doesn't fail. As recently as December 2019, this British SBS commando uses a World War II-era Fairbairn-Sykes knife during an ambush by ISIL fighters in Afghanistan, demonstrating the enduring utility of cold steel. The Commandos prove that a hunter class of soldiers can achieve strategic impacts impossible for conventional forces, forcing the Third Reich to tie down divisions on quiet coastlines while their main front collapses in the east. The myths of the Commandos become Germany's nightmare, a fear that pushes the Nazi leadership to abandon the laws of war in a desperate, failed attempt to suppress a force they cannot defeat on the battlefield. The freezing mists of the Lofoten Islands, the snow-covered cliffs of Bruneval, the burning docks of Saint-Nazaire. These are the places where the hunter class writes its name in history, where ordinary men become legends, where courage is measured not by the odds of survival, but by the willingness to stand in the face of impossible odds. The Commandos of 1941 through 1945 define the architecture of modern asymmetric warfare, ensuring that the shadows of occupied territory will forever remain a nightmare for those who seek to rule through terror. The Third Reich learns this lesson too late. The knife cuts both ways. If you fight outside the rules, you'll perish outside the rules. A lesson written in the smoke and blood of 1,000 silent operations, 1,000 midnight raids, and the cold, lethal look of a Fairbairn-Sykes dagger catching the moonlight one last time before it strikes. The hunter class never ends. It just finds new prey. So here's the question. Could a force like the Commandos exist today, or has modern warfare made the hunter class obsolete? Drop your answer in the comments below. If you want more stories of impossible missions and the warriors who carried them out, subscribe and hit that notification bell. And share this video with anyone who thinks special operations started with the Navy SEALs. They need to know where it all began.